So, how do you deal with a problem player in your game? I'm going to give you a simple solution that doesn't involve violence, it doesn't involve killing PCs, and usually seems to work pretty darn well in my experience. Hey, Luke here. So before we jump in, I just want to let you know real quick that my most recently published adventure, Into the City of Spiders, is out now on DriveThruRPG. It's designed for a party between levels 10 and 13 and has lots of drow in it. So if you're interested in checking out, I will put a link to it down in the description and up in this card above my head. Anyway, let's get this shameless plug out of here and talk about dealing with problem players. Now, this video is going to have 3 parts to it. First, I'm going to talk about how you shouldn't deal with problem players, and then I'm going to talk about how you should deal with them, and finally, I'm going to give you a few examples from my games when I've had to deal with issues with my players. Alright, first, 4 things that you shouldn't do. And here's the reason I want to go over what you shouldn't do. I spend a lot of time over on Facebook or over on Reddit, and I read posts by DMs that have issues with their players, and some of the pieces of advice are just so bad, they border on insane. Alright, number 1 crap way to solve player problems is to do nothing. Just sit there like a lump and let your players wreak havoc in your game. Let that one player insult your other players and make them leave your game. Yeah, sure, just let him sit on his phone the whole time and not pay attention at all to what's going on. You know, just let him miss 3 out of every 4 sessions because he just didn't feel like D&D. Let him have his PC attack the other PCs. Let him steal from the other PCs. But don't worry, there is a happy ending here, trust me. Because at some point, if you don't deal with a problem player, your entire game is going to implode, and then you won't have to deal with him anymore. In fact, you won't have to deal with any of your players because you won't have a game. And real quick, in case some of you were wondering, some of those things I mentioned that are problems might not be problems for your game. In fact, you might run games where PCs steal from each other or they attack each other, and as long as all of your players are okay with that and it doesn't cause issues, then there's nothing wrong with that, right? Your game doesn't have to be like my game. So those are just examples. Take it with a grain of salt. Don't flip out on me in the comments, but if you want to, I guess you could. That's cool. Right down there below. You know how to type. Number 2 horrible way to deal with a problem player. Placate her with special treatment. Is she a special snowflake? Does she want that magic item really bad? Is she throwing a fit about it? Well, give it to her. It'll make her shut up for a while. And then, a little bit down the road, when she wants something again, she'll cause another problem until you finally give in and placate her once again. And the next thing you know, you're going to be in a never-ending cycle of putting the bottle in the baby's mouth, so to speak, to stop her from whatever bad behavior she's engaging in. And at that point, you straight up become her lackey. By the way, I publish weekly videos to help dungeon masters run awesome games. So if you want to level up your D&D game, consider subscribing. How's that for a well-timed plug? Number 3 smash-up way to deal with a problem player. Punish the player's character. Is he constantly arguing with you about the rules? He won't stop derailing the game session to talk about My Little Pony? Don't put up with that crap. Kill his PC already. I mean, you're the freaking DM. He might have My Little Pony, but you've got dragons. And there ain't nothing he can do about that. Except leave your game because you're being Alright, hey, let's have a little story time down in the comments. Let me know a time that you were in a game where a dungeon master dealt with a problem in a way that absolutely, hands down, made things much, much worse. And real quick, I want to give a shout out to my friends over at Intra-Party Conflict Podcast. They do a weekly D&D show, and just a few weeks ago, they had me on. It's actually a really cool podcast, and if you want to check it out, I will put a link to it down below in the description. Alright, now that we got all of that junk out of the way, I'm going to tell you how you should actually deal with a problem player. And I want you to brace yourself because this is going to be some groundbreaking, world-changing, mind-blowing stuff that I'm about to share. Talk with him or her calmly, respectfully, like an adult. And when you talk with that player, you need to do 2 things. First of all, share the behavior that's been causing an issue at the table, and also explain from your perspective as a DM, and possibly from the player's perspectives, why that behavior is causing an issue in your game. Now, this needs to be a conversation. Listen to your player. Try to understand from your player's perspective why he or she is doing that thing. And you need to also make sure that you very clearly and calmly explain your point of view on things. So there's probably going to be a conversation, a little bit of back and forth here, but at the end of it, you need to end with a clear call to action. Very explicitly, directly, but calmly and respectfully, tell the player what it is you would like him or her to do. Now, whether that's a behavior that he's going to stop, or possibly something that he's going to begin doing. Stop calling Jim Bob an idiot because it's starting to piss him off. Stop killing all of the NPCs in the world just for giggles because it's starting to annoy the other players, and you know what? It's rather ruining this game that I've put so much time into. Get off your phone and pay attention. You know, that sort of thing. But just remember, do it calmly and respectfully. I think the chances are really good that your player is going to respond positively to this and most likely change his behavior. And I truly believe that sometimes players do these things and they don't realize that it's causing a problem for you as the DM or for the other players. And until you talk to them and explain to them why it's a problem, they're just going to keep on doing it. You know, and then once you do talk to them, in my experience, players are more than happy to work with you and stop whatever bad behavior that is. And a quick note here, I'm calling it bad behavior. It doesn't necessarily have to be bad. It's just something that, for whatever reason, is causing a problem at your table, and you and possibly the other players would just like to put an end to. However, at the end of the day, if your player is unwilling to stop doing whatever it is that's causing the issue, then you have a very important decision to make. Can my game get along with this undesirable behavior, or is it ruining everybody else's game experience just a little too much? If it's the latter, then it's probably time to ask that player to leave your group. And I'm going to be honest with you, asking a player to leave your group is probably one of the most difficult things you're ever going to have to do as a DM, especially if that player is a friend. You know, I think another really important thing to consider too is that if you approach that player with that undesirable behavior and he is not receptive to it and he is unwilling to change, it's worth asking yourself, do I even want a player like that at my game? Alright, so now what I'm going to do is give a few examples from my games where I've had problems or issues with players and how I've resolved them and what the result was. Alright, the first problem, well, it's not the first problem, but one of the problems I've had over the years is I had a player once who, whenever he entered a room and there were bad guys there, his first instinct was to attack them. It would always be attack, instantly, immediately, the first thing he would want to do. Now, this isn't necessarily always a problem, and it might not be a problem in everybody's group, but what it does is it basically prevents any of the other players from doing anything in that situation. None of the other players have an opportunity to talk with the bad people, to have sort of a conversation with them. It also prevents the dungeon master from having that bad person interact with the players. Maybe that bad person was going to taunt them or have a little talk, or maybe one of these classic monologues or something. The point is that attacking off the bat steals a lot of options away from both the players and from the DM. And so basically what I did to this player is I just, before one of our games, I pulled him aside and I said, hey, you know, dude, I explained what I kind of just explained to you, and I said, this is kind of causing an issue, so if you wouldn't mind, most encounters are eventually going to turn into combat anyway. We all kind of know that. So if you wouldn't mind just kind of holding off a little bit, letting the other players interact more, and letting the bad guy maybe do something too, then I would greatly appreciate that. And you know what? It worked so well. The guy was like, oh yeah, that's not a problem. I totally understand. And now he's backed off a little bit from that. And it's great. It worked out really, really well. All right, so for the next one, I had a player who was playing a druid in my game, and he had this awesome druid spell that he would always cast, and it was like summon fae or summon woodland beings, and he would especially use it to summon pixies, right? I think you guys know, you guys might know where I'm going with this. And these pixies have some, for a CR 1/4 character, creature, monster, whatever, they have some really awesome abilities, including polymorph, transforming all of the characters into T-Rexes, that sort of thing. And it was not only causing game balance problems, right, but it was also bogging everything down, because now you had 8 pixies or whatever creatures he summoned that you would also have to deal with during the game. And so I didn't just change my entire game, go to the work and effort of changing my entire game to adjust for one issue, right? No, instead I believe more in root cause problem solving, call me crazy. And so I simply spoke to this player, I explained to him all the issues that I kind of just talked to you about, and we came to an understanding. He was totally cool with it, he was totally understanding, and we came to an understanding. What did we do? I think we decided to limit the number of pixies, especially pixies, that he could summon to like 1 or 2. It doesn't really matter what the exact agreement was, but the point is that we had a conversation and we came to an agreement on what we thought was reasonable and acceptable. I didn't want to just lay down the rule on him and totally squash his fun, but because we had a conversation and we talked about it, he was much more willing to go along with it than if I had just played DM hardball and told him how it was going to be. Alright, next little problem I had. So I have been a player in games where the DMs have totally outlawed electronics, cell phones, iPads, and things like that, because there is a fairly large problem with players being on their phones and being distracted and things like that. But I don't want to do that because there are lots of cool apps on your phones that you can use to help you during the game. There are dice rolling apps if you need them. There's especially a spellbook app on the Android that is amazing. I use it myself, and so I didn't want to outlaw it, but I noticed at one of my game sessions recently that many of my players were on their phones for large parts of the game, and it wasn't like causing a super big distraction or whatever, or I think they were still kind of paying attention, but it was beginning to be a little bit of a problem. And so at the very next game session, I just said at the very beginning, I was like, hey guys, I noticed that in the last game session I saw a lot of electronics out, and I think you guys were still paying attention and whatnot, but if you could just try to limit your usage of those, unless you're actually doing stuff in game for your characters, like spellbooks and stuff like that, then I would greatly appreciate it. And my players were super receptive to this. Nobody was pissed off or anything like that. They were just like, oh yeah, that's cool, no big deal. And then it was fine. The electronics only came out when they were clearly doing stuff in game, and so it worked out really well. Okay, last example that I'm going to give you here is this is the story of how I kicked out a player, the only player that I have ever kicked out of one of my games, to be clear. So basically this player, it all started with him constantly arguing with me about rules. He used to be a DM, he had some knowledge of it, but I will say that his interpretation of the English language was not exactly what I would be considered normal. And so there would be some arguments on rules, and these arguments would really derail the game. They would get people riled up, and it would just bring this like negative atmosphere to the game. And so that kind of was going on with this argument going back and forth. But I think the final straw was in the very last game session he was in. He said something to one of the other players, basically told him he didn't know how to play his own character, and that player got so mad that he left, and then he emailed us later saying, I am out of this game, I am done. And it was at that point that I realized that I need to do something about this player before, I've already lost one player because of his behavior. He is riling me up, and he is just creating this like kind of negative game environment. And so it was basically a matter of, either this player goes or other players are going to start leaving, and I'm not enjoying the game with him there either. And so, this was, unfortunately, there wasn't an opportunity to have a real one-on-one conversation. This was a conversation over email, but basically we kind of explained both of our sides and stuff, and it ended with me asking him not to come back to the game. And that's how it had to end. And it's unfortunate, right? I wish we could have been able to work it out, but I think there were just some irreconcilable differences between that player's play style, his personality or something, and me and the rest of the group. And he's not a bad person. I still respect the guy, and he brought a lot of really positive, awesome things to the game as well. He is the only player that has ever role-played a lawful evil character in a way that I was like, wow, I was mind blown by how well he could roleplay it. So I still respect the guy, but there were some differences there that just couldn't get worked out. And so it was just, it was one of those things where you had to part ways right before like the entire group blew up. And it's unfortunate, and I still kind of regret having to have done that, but it's just something that had to happen. And I think the point here is that not everything is meant to be. Not every group is meant to be. Not every player, not all of your players will automatically mesh together, right? And so sometimes this sort of thing, asking a player to leave, is just inevitable. All right, now one of my goals in running this channel is to create videos with information that you are going to find helpful, that's going to help you in your games. So if you have an idea for a video that is going to help you out, please let me know down in the comments. If you found this video helpful, hit that thumbs up button and share it with someone else who might find it useful. And until next time, let's play D&D.